All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'll be joined by Gene Chorba. Gene is the Senior Developer Relations at Riot Games, amongst many roles that he's had over the last 4 years. He's based in LA at the Riot Games head office, I believe, and he used to have a past in security. We're going to go into his whole past and journey into gaming, and he's also very active on Twitter. So if you're interested, you could check him out at gchorba on Twitter. And yeah, I'll talk to him about his role at Riot, APIs for games, which is a very interesting topic that I'd love to get deep into, and the parallels between software and game development, and just his thoughts on how those are crossing over in the future of gaming. So thanks for joining me today, Gene. Welcome.
Oh, glad to be here. I'm excited to do a podcast with you.
Cool. So yeah, first off, I mean this is a very open-ended question, but I love how the guests have been responding, and it's just, what is your experience getting into games? Like, what you can start as young as when you're a child playing games for the first time, and then your first job in games. I think that's a really important point as well.
Yeah. So I had this. My parents were very anti-TV, anti-video games. I mean, they knew they existed or whatever. My parents were like very limiting on the amount of time that I could play or whatever. And like, I think until I was, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years old, the only TV channel I watched on TV was public broadcasting, which is basically a channel here in the United States, which is very much educational heavy. It's a nonprofit paid for by the U.S. government. And so you got like stuff like Sesame Street and lots of other stuff, but a lot of documentaries, a lot of musicals, everything like that. And I remember there are two specific shows or things that I still remember, and like I feel like I really set me up where I am now from being like 5 or 6 years old. And one was them showing a documentary on skateboarding, and I was like, this is awesome, I'm gonna skateboard. And I ended up skateboarding my entire life. And the other one was they did an interview and a documentary on some game studio, and I need to go back and find out what game studio it was and everything, because I remember pictures, but I don't remember what was it actually about. But I remember seeing the office, and I'd like visit, my dad and my mom are both doctors, and I remember seeing, like, I'd gone to their offices and they're very like sterile and like very like doctors' offices. And then I remember seeing this office of a game designer, and it just being like cubicles, but with like toys all over the place. And like there were the equivalent of like Nerf guns before like really Nerf guns were really a big thing, and just like, and people like playing games and stuff like that. And I was just like, this looks so cool. And that stuck with me for a very long time, but I never actually thought I'd go work in gaming. I grew up as basically a software programmer, like a software engineer for many years. When I went to summer camps for computer programming, most of like from like when I was like 11 years old on, every summer I spent like a month at a computer camp, learning how to build computers, coding, etc. And I eventually actually went from being an attendee of those camps to actually then being an assistant counselor, then a counselor, then the person in charge of building the curriculums for these students, to then assistant director. Wow. And then before I had to go off and do other things. But in that process, I actually still got to do some of my gaming stuff. Like I was building curriculums there around how do you do assembly programming? How do you do OpenGL, DirectX? Or like, how do you do, like, even for like the really basic, like do MS Basic or stuff like that. But we had like this push by a lot of people being like, hey, I want to learn how to make a game. And so I had to go out and learn how to basically make a game so that I could then make like tutorials and stuff like that for gaming. And so I built like tutorials on how to use like Scratch and a game maker and various things moving up, and then Unreal and then Source Engine, and like, how do you build these things? How do you engineer these things? I would have loved to have Unreal with their blueprint system back then, because I could have taught so many more kids how to program, because there was this huge barrier of entry of like, you got to know C. And so I had to teach them C before I taught them how to program, how to do any game development. But then after that, I basically turned my back on a lot of that stuff because I went heavy into the security industry. I was a professional hacker for a few years. I did hacking competitions, security testing, various other things like that, and basically gave myself a reason to live through. I mean, like how could I live and make money through college and everything, and just like was like, what's the point of college? I'm making money throughout that time, and I had a ton of fun with it. I won something like 70 events in like 3 years.
Wow.
Definitely paid more than I actually would have had from a job at that point.
Sorry,
It was
how do
great.
those competitions work? Is there just like one server that you have to hack into the quickest kind of thing, and that makes you the winner?
So there's 2 or 3 different types of events that I would do. And this like is I do both like the straight up hacking, and then there's hackathons, which are hackathons are more like startup competitions, but like without the business side, more like, hey, how can you rapid prototype something that solves an issue in 48 hours?
Cool.
And so I did both. CTFs, capture the flags, are, hey, there is a server out there, and there's various things flags you need to capture from it. Like, how are you getting into it? And
Wow.
the more flags at the end of the competition, that team wins. Or the faster that all the flags got, that's how it is.
It's like a virtual orienteering competition.
Yes, basically, that's exactly what it is. That's a great analogy. And so I did both of those for a very long time, and had a lot of fun. And I was basically in my last year of school, and a company came, and they've been following me for quite a while with what I did with like the tech industry for hacking and security stuff. And a company called Ionic Security was like, "Hey, you're down the street from us. Do you want to come work for us?" And I was like, I mean, like, I got school. I don't know if I really want to go. And then they're like, well, here's a bag of money, and if you come work for us. And I talked to my parents, because my dad has 9 degrees. He has 3 doctorates, 2 PhDs. He just got a law degree from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, so he can write policy documents on healthcare for the European Union, for Europe. Well, actually, I don't know if it's Europe anymore. Um, uh, and all these different things. And then my mom has like a bunch of degrees as well. And I went to them. I'm like, hey, what do you think here? And they're like, take this. Like, this is what you worked for a degree for, is like someone giving you this opportunity.
Nice.
And so 1 or 2, I think it was 2 credits short of graduating. I took the plunge into the security industry as a full-time employee. I ended up working there for many years, first as an engineer, and then eventually started running their developer relations program, because this is an encryption startup where it was basically, how do we convince the rest of the world that it's a good idea to encrypt their documents? How do we manage the files, etc.? And we originally started as an enterprise type software company where it's like get big banks involved. But I, being from like the hacking dev rel developer community type scene, was like, hey, a big thing here is like, how do we get devs building this stuff? How do we get like this into open source projects, everything like that? And so I was tapped. I worked under a wonderful lady named Dalen Simmons, and she taught me a lot about how the that type of stuff worked. And I ended up transferring over into that type of part of the company. Eventually, I ended up leading that team as the product manager for developer experience, I think it was called at the time, because we didn't know what to call it. And did that for a long while, and I really enjoyed that. But that really got me into like the developer centric mindset. How do I like basically force multiply what I do at a company by involving a community of developers around me, which really like also harkened back to a lot of my love of like modding and stuff like that as a kid. And so I love that. And then Riot came calling. Riot was like, hey, do you want to do the same job but do it in gaming? And I was like, I don't know, because like I had ingrained myself in the security industry with like the government, with like security clearances, with all that stuff, and it was just like you eat and breathe security. And but at the same time, like the company went through a little bit of a rough patch, so I was like, okay, let me take this opportunity, and I moved over to Riot, and I cannot be happier. Like, I absolutely love what I get to do at Riot. So I'm close to 4 years now, and I've I came in and was working always. We have a DevRel team, and slowly like took more and more responsibilities to be able to do stuff. And it's been a huge journey. We went from like kind of like a afterthought, and like so it was like, hey, this is an extra bonus, to something that is bringing immense amount of value to Riot worldwide, which is like a launch requirement for various games.
So I'm fascinated by, and maybe it's just my lack of knowledge and experience, but are there many games that offer APIs?
I know of 3 that really do it well, and probably like 11 that do it and just be like, here it is, figure it out.
Right. So
like Roblox does it incredibly well.
okay.
Destiny does it very, very well, or Bungie. Blizzard, Activision, they do it okay. Like they have it. It's better than most. And then there's a bunch of studios that do something.
Right. So what I think is interesting about Riot is I kind of see Riot Games as it's a competitive esports like company. The games that they develop are competitive, and I think that puts it in an interesting category of almost like a sport, right? It's like you have leagues. It's more akin to football and like those seasons rather than the typical gaming experience. And it got me thinking about what is possible with an API. Like what if you watched the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, and you were able to get data of every player at every second and kind of provide that to someone to build apps and software from. And that's kind of my question is like, what are the possibilities with an API? Like, where's your mind from someone who really works at the core of it? Where do you see the potential of this?
So the thing is like it's kind of unlimited, and it's only going to get larger. I've one of the things I really appreciate Riot for allowing me to do this is like we have engaged in thought leadership where we're trying to explain to a lot of other game studios why they're doing some of these things, like why we're doing something and why they should be doing these things. Because it is this extension of your IP that you don't have to necessarily do. And you can basically force multiply. And it's only going to get more advanced. When we started doing this type of stuff, and I joined the team, we were exclusively web APIs, where it was very limited stuff. But then like technology over the last 4 years, when it comes to computer vision, computer integration tools, stuff like that, has expanded more and more rapidly. So now we have tools that are like, we have to build out policies and build out systems to be able to account for people being able to computer vision read a screen and almost immediately give you the response back of like, how is that information actually, like, what is that information, even if we don't intend to make that available. Same thing with like reading memory from computers, or like how you hook that up. Sure, like we could flag it as anti-cheat and be like, you got to stop. But at the same time, that's like, are they doing anything that's like really negative? We very much like take people and bring them back into the light. If like they move into if they go really dark side, we bring down the hammer. But like, I'm very pleased that like probably only 3 times a year do I have to actually shut down a company. Usually it's like, hey, please don't do that. And stop doing that. But like we are moving into a world where this stuff is inevitable, where I'm sure that like I don't know how the Among Us team feels about all of their mods and stuff like that that's going on around them, but that's stuff that's happening whether they build out a system to support mods or not. Or like with sports, where like I love the traditional sports analogy, because with games, you know the exact position of your character on the screen at all times.
Yeah.
In a basketball, football, soccer, baseball, rugby, whatever, you don't have that positional data. So what, at least in American sports, we've started to doing in baseball, football, everything stadiums, is we have these new camera tracking systems, and each camera tracks like the entire screen or tracks an individual player. And now we can actually get that positional data for the entirety of their play. So one thing that really amazing happened was like during the NFL playoffs, like I think it was 2 weeks ago, they did a collaboration with Nickelodeon, which is a children's network here in the States, and they did basically Minecraft block style animations of every play that was like a big play, and they did it immediately.
Wow.
And the way they were able to do that is they actually had every positional data of every player and were able to just recreate it on the fly like that. And and so like when you see stuff like that happening in a professional sport where they're having to find these technical solutions to solve that information, imagine how much easier any of those things are going to be in a game where the data is already there. We just have to build a pipeline to expose it.
Totally. Personally, when it comes to Riot, I'm a big fan of Valorant. I'm a big fan of FPSs. And what I find very interesting is the whole marketing side of post a competition, the montages that they create. Like before, because I used to play Call of Duty back in the day, and I was part of the kind of montage community then. And you used to have people create frag movies, and they have to recreate scenes themselves. And it was, I think, a lot more work than what it is now. Especially, you can probably recreate plays with a click of a button and get different angles, and that's from like a marketing and content standpoint. It's not even gameplay. Man, there's actually so many areas.
We did something similar to that we did something that basically set up people directly for that in League of Legends. It's called League Director, and it's basically we've open sourced the tool, and it allows people to basically set up anything and set up camera angles, set up everything around that for their games, and be able to mess around with that and do all those replays and videos. And so like with League of Legends, you can see these great, like that game's never ever been designed to be looked at anything more than that isometric angle. But with these camera tools, we're able to build these animations of you flying through the map, or like an ash arrow goes and you can follow the arrow and you're doing like the Death Star trench type style. And that stuff is also like, it's part of what we have to do. It's like DevRel for gaming is like we've pushed an envelope where it's like this huge thing, but there are different things where it's like, am I supporting creators? And like, I mean, through that I am supporting creators, but I'm mainly also supporting the broadcast teams around the world, tournament organizers, everything like that. And so that's a great reason for us to build technical tools for that. Same thing for tournament organizers. We have led a charge of being like, how do we automate tournaments? If you're trying to run a tournament in most games, and even some of our games right now, it is, hey, I need to be there monitoring and saying who won, who lost, and moving people up in the bracket and setting everything. My goal is that you should be able to just like click a button in the client or on a third-party website and be like, I'd like to run a tournament, and people join it, and it just runs and you play in it or whatever. And at the end, there's a winner declared arbitrarily by like something else because of the record that happened. And it's all handled by like an API and stuff like that. With League of Legends, we have those APIs, and that's one of the reasons we have some of our larger match history APIs. It's so like when Valorant matches happen, they could pull the records and automatically tell you, okay, yeah, this team won, this is what happened. Or when League happened, that's what happened. TFT, lore, etc. That like those types of things are super important.
I'd love to know if you could give three different examples of ways that the API are used, maybe three different areas of the game, like some creative, some more strategic or part of coaching or whatever. I'd love to know just three different public-facing examples that you can share.
Yeah. We like tournaments is a big one, where we support people being able to build tournament systems out there. You got major companies out there that are running things for hundreds of people, thousands of people. There's also people who are running tournaments every hour, every minute, every 10 minutes. Like one of the coolest things is how regional various things happen for gaming. The Turkey region for League of Legends, and probably actually all of our sport, is obsessed with tournaments. They prefer tournament play over any other type of gameplay for our games. And so there's like a tournament in Turkey running every 5 minutes of the day, like clockwork, and it's full of like 50 to 100 people. It's amazing.
Wow.
And they use these automated sites to run it and everything like that. So that's a big one. Then obviously we have the esports side where we have people who are doing scouting of potential new players, of the existing players, the understanding of the global meta, to know like this thing's like what's going on here, what's going on here. Oh, this region's discovered this weird combination and a win rate's really high. Like it was just a lot of data science type stuff
Hmm.
around that. And understanding like what's the future of the sport going to be, or like what you can do it. Some of the best analysts that I've gotten a chance to work with will basically message me being like, look what cool data I found. We're gonna play this way this weekend, and they'll call what they're gonna do, and then I'll watch that weekend, and they will do it, and it'll be amazing because
Hmm.
they'll have that data advantage. And
Wow.
then the last one is how do you help players get better? So you've got like we have desktop apps, we have websites, etc. And basically worldwide, 9 out of 10 players per game of League of Legends use a third party tool.
Hmm.
It is insanely, everybody uses a third party tool, and they use them to find their builds, to know what runes they should use, what is the competitive landscape like, to scout their other players they're about to play against, everything like that.
Wow. So
Yeah.
in Valorant, I see AimLab, for example. It's an app that people use to practice their aiming and reaction speed. And I noticed the other day that you can plug the Valorant settings, the same
Yeah.
settings. Is that through an API? So that's provided to AimLab?
So that was not provided through a API. That was more provided through, hey, this is how we think about shooting, and being willing to share that with people. Things
Mm,
like that, honestly, are super dangerous. I will credit them for how they're doing some of that stuff, because like there's this fine line where we have to walk between um it is a tool and it is a fan game. Because like if a simulator or like something out there is like, we'll teach you how to dodge in game, or we'll teach you how to do stuff in game, and then they use any of our IP, I have to treat that as a fan game, and I have to unfortunately shut it down, because like
mm.
a fan like that's our IP. It's dangerous for us to have that stuff out there. But what they're doing excellently is they're only being like, hey, this is a training tool for
Mm,
any shooting game. Let us import the settings from that game so that you can do it, but it's still their IP. And I really love how that works.
totally.
And a bunch of other companies are doing the same thing. But it's really cool around that type of stuff.
So it sounds interesting how you're talking about third-party apps using data, like data advantage for
Yeah.
their plays and things. Do Riot have a lot of in-house teams that use the same API to kind of, make those same adjustments, balancing adjustments, or meta game adjustments?
They're it is a offshoot of the same data pipeline. So basically there's a data, the way it's structured would be like internally there's this big data pipe, and what we do is we just divert part of it to external, but the internal get the same amount of data, same data. There is very little, if anything, that is made available internally that is not available through one of our APIs. At least for League of Legends, some other games we're working on making that more feasible.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to know if it's anything that you're allowed to share, like things that you can't put in the API, or like things that would be crossing the line, making it too easy or too unfair. Is there
Yeah.
any like line that you?
So there's these two different things here. One is, what type of stuff would we like it could be unfair or whatever. So something that, why I think that every single game company, if you're going to do data type stuff like this, has to have someone on staff, is you have to think about these things as a game design perspective, and you have to review them. It can't be an open ecosystem, because things will definitely affect how people play the game. I've talked to a lot of early WoW devs, current WoW devs, etc. And there is like the people who were there very early on, they designed a different style of game than what currently exists, because
Mhm.
add-ons changed it so much. Now, if you're playing World of Warcraft, and you don't have, I don't know, like Raider.io for your gear score and everything like that. you don't have deadly boss mods or big wigs or some of these add-ons, people are not going to invite you to a group, or they're going to kick you from a group or whatever. It's like, it's a requirement. Or used to be in that game, it was very more like RPG heavy, where it's like, oh, you have a quest. Okay, go here and read this book on the shelf, and then there'll be a clue in there. And then you have to go to this other land to find it. And you didn't know where those things are, so you had to go look up where you're going, or you had to make the leap mentally and read the lore. Now it's like you have a quest. It has a big glowing dot on the screen that tells you where to go. And there's even add-ons that give you a basically a Google Maps style arrow on your map on your screen, being like, oh, it's this way 100 feet, and then you turn right. And it's like it like really changes like the game design perspective of that.
Totally.
And so we have to be very conscious of those types of things as well with our games. Like, we don't want something to become a requirement to play. Like, could you play League of Legends without any tools? Yes. Does it make it a better experience? Yes. Yeah, and you might get some advantages of scouting people, everything like that. But it is not a massive like advantage around those things. It's just it's an ease of use. It's a life type thing. Getting your time back. And so but we have to think about that type of stuff and be like, and what feels bad for someone to play against. So like a big example that I'd use is, we had some people who were like, we want to make a site that tells you the jungle path of every jungle path of the other person you're playing against. And I'm like, I mean, that actually kind of feels bad, because you're good, like that's going to feel really bad to play against. That's kind of going to be like, I mean, sure, it might teach them something. And so that's something we've gone back and forth on. And then there's stuff out there like, what if we tell you the perfect build? Or what if we tracked all of the summoner timers for you? And it's like, no, because then that removes the agency of you needing to learn, and you need to be these things. With things like TFT, where the skill expression is how quick you can make a decision, removing the players' need to make those decisions would be a game-breaking experience. Yeah. So when we do TFT products and allow TFT products, you have to still allow them to do stuff. So like, could developers feasibly build tools that would auto tell you what you would like to be the best comp, probably like to play? Potentially. Would we ever allow those? No, because it would remove that agency from the player and make it very sterile, and you'd basically just have people playing these best comps. And usually they're wrong, is the thing. Like, one of the big things with TFT is people would always be, oh, this is the best comp. And I'm like, that might be the best comp with a 100% win rate, but the odds of you getting that comp is like 1,000,000 to 1. So like, don't try and force it. And so we have to balance those data needs and those philosophies around that type of stuff. And I forget what the second part of the question was.
Oh, I mean, that was more than enough of an answer.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. I really love how Riot develops games, and I don't know if it's announced or anything, but there was talks at the end of last year of them developing an MMO next, and
we did announce that we're doing an MMO.
Okay.
We did it through a tweet, and that is literally all we've said.
Awesome. Okay, well, so that's really exciting, because, well, it's interesting to me because I feel like Riot have this perfect formula when it comes to creating these kind of repeatable sports-like experiences, and when it comes to an MMO, it's funny because I listened to the podcast, the How I Built This podcast, from the founders of Riot Games, and how they went from World of Warcraft to League of Legends, to Dota, and then to League of Legends, and now they're kind of going the other way. What do you have any thoughts, or I don't know, it's just an interesting thought that I have about how they'll develop an MMO in relation to the previous games that they've made, which is a very different experience.
I really can't comment on the MMO because we really haven't announced anything other than we've announced we're making one, and we're hiring. Cool. So if anybody would like to work on an MMO, I believe we are hiring heavily. About like our I can talk a little bit about our development and how we do stuff. one of the reasons I've always thought that we'd be good at eventually making an MMO, if we could pony up the amount of time, effort, and money it requires to actually build an MMO, because they're insane journeys with like who knows if it'll succeed at the end. We're like a shooter or something like that. You have a little more like I can pivot this versus like something in MMO, because it could just be the MMO is not fun or people just don't gravitate to it or whatever. Because like an MMO is about the other people you play with, and if you don't have a strong user base, it's not there. But like one of the things that I've always said about Riot is we're a content factory. Like we do one thing really, really well, and that is we provide you content every 2 weeks, potentially more depending on the game, and or some of the games it's a little bit less. But it is we drop a new skin, a new character, a new something every 2 weeks, and we do that every year for the last 8 to 10 years. So every time you join one of our games, you know, if you like, it's never stale, where it's like, oh, the new champion's out, cool, or oh, my character got a new skin, that's really cool. So like when I'm very excited to if the MMO actually happens, because I'm sure it's in, I don't know what stage is actually in. I'm excited to see what that content factory and content pipeline does for like something like that, because one of the things that for me is rough with a lot of games I play is like I play it and I'm like, oh, when's there gonna be more content? That's never something I worry about with our games. It's always like here's the new set, here's the new thing that I get to do, and like the patches happen very quickly, and they're like everybody's very tied into all of our games because of that reason. Because like what is Riot at the end of the day? We're an art company. We sell art, and the games are the reason we sell that.
Yeah, right. I'd love to talk to you more about that, the conversation of our games art, and I'd love to know.
That's what our skins are. They're just pretty pictures that people pay money for.
Yeah. So the art is being kind of added onto a game loop. But do you feel like gameplay itself is an art form, like the way that game mechanics function? Do you consider that an art form?
I absolutely believe that. I don't know if people who are listening, or if you have never played Journey, Journey is an excellent example of that, of like gameplay being an art form, because you don't talk, you just float around, meet people, everything like that. That is art. But I also think that like there's so much type of stuff that could do, and like, is dance an art? Yes, absolutely. If you're doing high level raiding, combat, fighting games, shooting games, whatever, the movement, coordination, and everything like that is akin to a dance. And so, and the gameplay makes that possible. So like when you see, I was watching a friend play whatever the Final Fantasy MMO last night, and he playing it, and I had never played it, and I was like, it literally looks like you're dancing around this. And he's like, yeah, and there's like these audio cues and these visual cues, and I'm like, yeah. So it's like, is DDR art? Heck yeah. Like it's a way for you to consume another art form, but in that form you also are making art. And that's a thing for me, where it's like, and like everybody's really pearls clutches around like what is like true art, and I'm just like, everything's art.
Yeah,
it's in the eye of the beholder.
Totally. Yeah, that's an interesting topic, and I feel like
I think code can be art. I think that there is something beautiful about the way that matchmaking works, and it puts something like that. Like people honestly probably forget a bunch is before 10 years ago or 11, 12 years ago, good matchmaking queues and systems really didn't exist. It was like it was like Halo 2 and League and like 2 other games around that time were like, no, instead of doing lobbies, we'll match you. And that changed the industry, where it was like the impetus on finding people to play was no longer on you. It was on the game studio to find people for you to play with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that kind of is an interesting topic to kind of go a bit deeper on. That kind of talks about algorithms and matchmaking algorithms that you create, and then also you kind of lose touch with the algorithms if you're thinking about social networks and things like that. Do you have any thoughts on AI and kind of what line that's crossing in terms of the future of entertainment and art?
So I'll admit I own a few AI generated art pieces because it's
Interesting.
really cool.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I love when, sorry, excuse me, this tea is getting to me. I love when like I can show a neural network or something like that, a piece of art, and understand how it perceives it and see that through the landscape of code. And so it like looks at something like the scream and and looking at its rendition of it is like, oh, it doesn't care about the fact that someone's screaming. It actually cares more about the background. And it's a different, it forces me to look at a painting or a piece of art in a different way. Like I think criticism is art, like literary criticism, art criticism, everything like that, where it's like basically helps you form an opinion or shows a different way to look at things. And I think AI and these types of tools allow you to do the same thing, where it allows you to separate how, especially like when I'm using it to analyze a piece, it separates the things that I see, and I get to see other parts of it that's something, because it has a different perspective. And I can code it to show a different perspective, and like switch that up as well. It's like, oh yeah, show me the background, show me whatever. And so I think AI is going to be huge in this ring. The one that I'm not so sure yet is how will it be used around gaming. Like, sure, you're going to have the tools for like anti-cheat where it helps you detect things, or you're going to have things that like help you with like how do you build better bots to play against, or like the director from Left 4 Dead type style things. But are we going to like, there's something core of its first person play that I don't know how quickly. Like we're gonna have to see some pretty large societal like changes to see people being like, I'd rather play a bot than play a person on that side. But like how content is shown to you, how it learns how you like to play and stuff like that. That stuff's really cool.
Totally. No, it's that you've articulated that really clearly, and I appreciate you going there because you're answering questions that I hadn't even figured out how to ask.
But there is something to definitely be said about the power of AI in these spaces where we can do some pretty incredible things. And I think honestly, AI is going to be more powerful at a lower level game. Like, and lower, I mean, I don't mean that as like anything negative. I mean like in the AAA, AA, single A, indie style like thing. It's more helpful at the indie level and basically be like, I don't need to do something. This thing will happen versus something like a AAA studio or something like that, where it's like we have people who are like entire jobs are going to be to do this. Totally. Because and I'm always also not yet societally convinced that AI is the answer to like playing against enemies in game, because there is something very cathartic about finding the weakness in a game designed enemy and then taking advantage of it. It's the whole like conceit of something like Dark Souls, where it's like each of these bosses has one weakness. How do I take advantage of it? If you gave me an AI based Dark Souls boss that just learned, that'd be awful. Like I would never win. I mean, you'd be like, would the competition go from, oh, I beat it and this is how I beat it, to who could last the longest? That could be a thing. But I'm not sure about people's motivations around that type of thing. There is like the roguelike entire phenomenon is like I'm being faced with this brutally hard thing that is static, but I continue to gain abilities to make it easier. And that does not sit well with something like an AI.
Yeah, no, I think that's the whole discussion about what makes a game fun as well, as something that's not too easy and not too challenging, and you kind of slowly level up. And I mean, maybe an AI will be smart enough one day to incrementally make themselves more difficult to the point that it is a good challenge and it is it keeps you there. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation.
The biggest AIs we're going to see is in gaming anytime soon, I believe, will be in the matchmaking side, where it will understand a profile of the player through chat, through gameplay, through whatever, and try and do a better job of aligning them with other players to play with. Because toxicity is something that we all want to get rid of and to like bring down. And maybe we can find ways psychologically through these types of matchmaking and like understanding better profiles of them to match those players with other players. Because like one thing that so we have this thing called Clash with League of Legends, which is basically our self-run tournaments in clients. I believe they're once a month. And you basically have to show up with 4 friends, and you join this tournament, and it's great. You love it. You play like 3 games and then 3 games, and at the end you get a trophy that actually displays in game whenever you join it if you win. And it's by different tiers, but we see so much less toxicity in that model versus solo queue because you know all those people and you have this common goal thing. And it's like insanely lower. And I'm curious how we can do more things in more games to do that type of thing, where it's like that's almost a game design change that creates less toxicity. And I think we can do more of that as an industry.
Totally, yeah. I think you're right. Toxicity is definitely an interest, like a problem to solve as things become more immersive, more competitive, and that's a really good point to end on. We are kind of running out of time, and I feel like we've scratched the surface on so many topics, but I really appreciate the areas you went in on AI and art, and those are topics that I find really interesting and kind of questions that I want to pursue during the development of this podcast. So I really appreciate the kind of value that you gave from a perspective at Riot. If I was to ask one more question before we ended, I guess it would be like a two-facing question. One is, if someone was interested in being part of a DevRel team of a company or Riot one day, what advice would you give to them? And if someone was wanting to use the API and to create experiences that augmented the games that you're working on, what advice would you give?
So to join a team like mine or to do what I do is a little bit of luck because the game industry is still growing. But I very much foresee that there will be much more roles like mine in the future. It is a mix of skills that not a lot of people have, and you don't necessarily have to have them all. Like you can build out a DevRel career with 1 or 2 of these rather than all of them. But the core of everything you're gonna need is you're gonna have great communication skills, like because I have to be able to distill very technical concepts to anybody, where it's like I could go into a room and talk to senior engineers and be on the same page with them and explain what's going on, as well as go down to people who are not involved with the coding process at all and explain how it works at the same time. You have to be able to distill this information and provide in a way that everybody is available. And maybe it's not at the same time, but you have like when it's called upon, you can communicate in those different realms. So communication is huge around this type of thing. And honestly, that's a skill I think everybody in gaming needs to level up a ton. The others are you're gonna need to be able to think in a very product focused way, where you are basically having to work with game design, with anti-cheat, with like every BD, everyone around the company to be like, hey, how do we make sure that these initiatives fit within the global business sense of the company, and how do we make sure that they do things while building out because you're going to have to build out policies and systems that align with those things. So like someone with a public policy background probably is going to kill it in this type of system. And you're gonna have to deal with the legal issues and how do you build out like rights systems and everything. and collaboration incredibly important, because like I talk to like 11 different divisions of the company every day to be like, hey, let's talk about these different things, and make sure that we're aligned on things and build out new products, because one of the things is like it never stops in this industry. If you're doing DevRel for a traditional tech company, you probably have like, oh, here's the new product, and then 2 years later there's like, oh, we have a new product. In gaming, it's, as we said, 2 weeks, where it's like when a new champion is coming out, I have to make sure that we have built out processes to make sure that that champion information is adequately put into the API. It's in our static data systems, so that when people want to build something, they can pull that champion's information. They know the information about like how hard he hits, etc. And all that information, and make sure it releases on the same time and everything.
Wow.
And so you're building a lot of these procedures. So it's very product heavy. It's very communications heavy. Honestly, the engineering can take a backseat on a lot of that. But it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to have like some sort of engineering background.
Nice. Yeah. And the second end of that question was, if someone was maybe they're quite a young developer wanting to get maybe more advanced in the modding community and actually create like an API product, what advice would you give?
Yeah, start doing it. So developer.riotgames.com is the website to be able to log in. Most of our games, we have a dev key. You don't even have to like register a product with us. You just, by signing up on the site, you get a low level key to be able to mess around. It does expire after 24 hours, and you just go and refresh it. And then you can apply for like a personal key when you're doing like a big personal project, or a production key if you're trying to build something even larger than that. And then we have a huge community of people that are trying to build things, and great support. And the real thing is just start building. That is my biggest feedback to anybody, is just like, why are you not building it? Because and it's something I have to introspectively look at myself. It's like, why am I not building something yet? Why am I sat still? And it's important. But like, don't kill yourself doing it. You can build stuff. You can hobbyist. You can build really cool stuff. And some of the coolest stuff I've seen is just like a one-off project from someone being like, hey, I wanted to try this stuff out. Someone back in the day built this tool that basically, when you launched the game and you chose a different champion, it gave you different keybinds. Because like when I play certain champions, I want different keybinds of how I play. And I'm like, this is a hobbyist cool little project, but this is a huge amount of use for me. And stuff like that. Like, there's tons of stuff out there that's really cool that you can do and just build it. I'm really a huge fan of our community, because it is this like obviously at the top you're going to have people who are building businesses, who are building like incorporating like tens and millions of dollars of a month or whatever, but the majority of our community is people building stuff for fun, for their friends. Build a Discord bot, build a website for the first time and integrate it. Like, I probably like once or twice a year, some teacher somewhere in the United States at a school will be like, okay, we're going to build our first website, and using an external API, and they'll be like, we're going to use the Riot Games API. And then I'll get like an inbound request of like 500 API requests. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I'll talk to them and be like, oh, I love this. And they'll guess, I'll come in and talk to them as well. Cause like, we love this type of thing. And if people are having trouble, feel free to ask for help, either from myself or our developer Discord, which has I think we have tens of thousands of people in there constantly asking questions. Highly recommend that. Everybody's incredibly welcoming in this space. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Gene. And so if anyone's building anything, share it with Gene on Twitter. You can find him at Chorba, Chorba.
I love hearing about, it doesn't even have to be our games. I love hearing about businesses or tools you're building around gaming. Because that's the thing. If you're building something for another game, I'm going to come to you and be like, Why aren't you building it around our games?
Nice. No, I love that. You clearly have a passion for gaming and for building new tools. It's not just about Riot. It's not just about your job. So I love that. I look forward to continuing to engage with you on Twitter, and I wish you the best on your journey and the MMO when it gets released and the challenges that arise with that. I'm sure I'll talk to you again sometime in the future. But thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, good. Thanks. Take care. See ya.